Okay, this is Sam and Charlie, and we're going to talk about our experiences. I'm going to talk about what my college is doing with prior learning assessment and how we're changing things to keep it more equity focused. I work at Northeastern Junior College in Northeastern Colorado, and I am fortunate to have learned about LivedX developed by Dr. Geeta Verma at UCD. When she showed me the program, initially she showed me how UCD was using it to work with concurrent students and awarding them credit at UCD. I believe there's 9 courses that students can use. And so when I met with her, I asked if we could use the platform and extend it to any and all courses, not just use it for concurrent students like UCD is doing, but I wanted to use it and market it for post-traditional students, particularly working with Latinx. The county I'm in is 93% white, but Yuma County, which is south of us, has a large Hispanic Latinx population. One of the things we wanted to do, and we were plugging this into, was creating an accelerated associate's degree in business with bilingual teachers, but also using something, the portfolio process here. When I got here, I asked for portfolios that had been done, and I was given one binder dated 1999. In 25 years, there had been one student who had applied for prior learning assessment. The LiveDex program, we've been using it. We piloted it with our non-traditional, post-traditional students. All but one was Latinx, and it was a success. I guess I could talk more about why it's a great program. To quickly summarize why I think it's great, a lot of times faculty see prior learning assessment as a burden because it's working with the student and maybe in creating the portfolio, it's like, oh, you need to develop this paper more and things like that. And what LiveDex does is it takes AI and helps guide the students on things that they need to do to boost their portfolio. It lifts that burden off of faculty. It streamlines it for administration, and it is very student user friendly. So I'm really pro LiveDex. And yeah, what we're now doing is we're using it this semester to work with concurrent students. The equity piece, what Dr. Verma talks about is how this program is good for the first mile and the last mile. Oftentimes, students may come in and need developmental education, and that can put them behind as far as a guided pathway or certain structures of finishing things. By earning credit, anywhere from 6 to 9 credit hours, it can get them at an equitable place. Looking at the statistics of how many people, like in our one reading where it talked about one university where there were so many students in their senior year that had $1,000 bill and couldn't pay it. They waived that fee and it boosted completion. She talks about how this is great for that last mile. We're offering free credit. If you have the lived experience, we walk you through it. It's a way to earn free college credit. With that, I will pass the baton to Charlie.
The readings this week were really interesting. For the discussion question, I'm going to use my own experience working at a community college in the state of Washington. And so the focus here will be the development education or remedial courses. One of the things is I stepped into a leadership role that was via ATD, our math department that was piloting the co-rec model and exploring what that looks like and collecting data and doing some analysis on what students were being caught in systems of inequity within the math sequence and looking at the overall structure of the sequence and how students were faring in those classes. And so One of the interesting things that this was something that the math department brought to the administration as a pilot, and it was really interesting to see the limitations of a neoliberal reform approach to the change process because while they initiated the process, many of the math faculty did not like what was found in the data about the student experience. And so one of the things, it was just like a Pandora's box that we opened up, which was really fascinating, which I enjoyed, but it was traumatic for other folks who wanted it to be a very linear or black and white kind of change process or decision-making process. Because the Pandora's box required us to really question at the root of what we're doing and our purpose and our mission. It forced us to think about all of the institutional values that usually just sit on websites and about sections about the college. It forced us to actually wrestle with that in real time. Some of the things that came out of it were you had one of the things we found is that while the students fared well, extremely better in the co-rec model and with that type of support, explicitly those students who were in our areas of inequity. And at this particular institution, it was Black and Brown male students and single parents. But nationally, similar trends for low income and non traditional, in quotes, students that fare better in co-rec models. We also saw that we were creating a credit issue with how we structured the classes, right? The co-rec added on some more credits for the way that we were processing things. And so it ended up causing an issue for students being one credit short or one credit over in the sequence, throwing off financial aid for individuals. And so that was a really uncharted issue that came out. And while the approach was intentional, or it believed it was intentional around equity, when these things start shaking out, it really made clear those who seeking real equitable change and those who were looking for continuous improvement that might be accessible to historically marginalized and low socioeconomic individuals. My approach in advocacy was to really ask the question. Another thing was that some of the faculty came out and said we need to be paid more to do the co-rec, and so there's the financial investment into the co-rec, and then what you find about the co-rec is it's essentially making your classroom and pedagogical approach accessible to the entire classroom. It forces the traditional, rigorous, in quotes, nuclear focused, socially privileged, economically privileged student from being the center of the pedagogical approach to actually widening the pedagogical approach and classroom experience to who's in the classroom and provides that extra support and wraparound support. Students more often than not were successful in those programs. And so one of the things that I advocated for, which was blasphemy, is that we think about redoing the credit structure for these courses and using our actual stated mission value. If we were intention around doing equity minded transformation, this is what we needed to do. Ultimately, we were successful. It's a perfect example of how good equity intent doesn't always happen. I think about the role of the people who have to take on the pushback and the issues when you say the unspeakable thing or you can advocate for the thing that makes people feel uncomfortable, but it's the right thing to do. I think about how often, if those people aren't in the room or are willing, do these equity efforts fall by the wayside and don't work. And so how we measured it, we had our IR team there from the beginning. Part of one of the things that was a good thing is that we had to report back to ATD. And so it kept us accountable to the way we were doing, and it didn't allow for folks to start getting creative with how we were measuring that. And I think that suffice for that. I think last thing, I think one of the things that I'm going to write in my aha that take out of the readings is the Hostler and Bontrager's chapter on marketing. It literally makes my skin crawl the way that they are talking about marketing. And one of the things that I think is fascinating that when using their language, their argument, and the foundation of their argument is you can't differentiate marketing as it's defined by the American Marketing Association that they use, as well as by Hostler and Bontrager. You can't differentiate that between propaganda, like that textbook definition of propaganda, not a political one, just a basic Webster's dictionary definition of propaganda as well as the one that's in the our text. You can't differentiate the two. And I think that is a fascinating thing to sit with. That's all I had. Sam, did you have anything else that
You know,
resonated with you?
yes, the marketing was, there were times it was hard to deal with that. But for me, I tried to see grains of hope of not commodifying people and not being like mission based versus market based. I tried to focus on the data, which I didn't talk about. It's interesting how you say like it was ATD, so you had strict guidelines on what you collected and how you reported. I didn't talk about what we were doing as far as collecting and evaluating student success. What we're doing is like really like beginning stages, and I guess looking at demographical data, have we increased reaching minoritized people? That's what we're looking at. I don't know if we haven't really talked about getting into like quantitative. I think that would probably be good. It gets more difficult the larger the population gets, but yeah, I don't know. What would you have any suggestions?
No, I think you got to do what's relative and responsive to your context and material conditions. But I think that generally the field has to engage more deeply and critically persistence versus like
Yes.
access or recruitment, because you can do these interventions and a number will go up here, but what about the journey across the journey? And so I think about the way that we segment change to allow for us to be able to really fix the numbers in a way. When we talk about access and we show the numbers from that we've increased in, but then the dark shadow to that is, or what's your drop off?
Yeah.
You know, we're losing these first out of the first. How many students are you losing the first semester, first quarter? And without having that comparative and seeing the full picture, it's almost for me a little bit disingenuous. But I think so. To respond to your piece, I think thinking about not just access but persistence, and what are the wraparound supports needed for those who have had prior learning experiences that are non-traditional, non-Western, that we can incorporate and have wraparound supports and affirmation for when they come here, versus just having it be, we'll let the door open for these individuals, and then when you get here you're on your own. And so I think about persistence and the intentional wraparound supports that extend beyond access into persisting through their academic goals.